Our guest today is Justin Bennett. In the last 2 decades, Justin has coached over 1,000 clients to gain control of their money and pay off a combined debt total of over $10 million. In his debut book, Level Up Your Finances, Justin tackles the core financial issues that hold people back from winning with their money. His straightforward, no nonsense style helps people move from living paycheck to paycheck to achieving real financial freedom. Justin, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Joy, glad to be back.
So last time we talked about those hidden financial struggles that pastors often face and the power of accountability. And today I want to dive into something that you've mentioned that really caught my attention, the difference between financial freedom and financial independence. So can you break that down for us?
Yeah, you bet. It was interesting. I was on a call just yesterday. In my book, I say the first thing we got to do is become aware. I was on a mastermind call with a bunch of coaches, and one of the other coaches said, actually, the first step is defining. And I'm like, I say that because in the preface of the book, I took time to go, how can we define these terms? Could we throw them around? Financial freedom, financial independence. In fact, if you do a Google search on financial freedom, you're going to get lots of different answers that aren't the same. So for me, and I'm not saying I'm the guy, but for me, I define financial freedom when you've gotten rid of all your debt, everything but your house, have a fully funded emergency fund, and you're living on less than you make. If those three things, you're in freedom because you don't owe anyone anything, and your money has a lot better opportunity to be you're in control, not the money's in control, right? Financial independence is when we have enough money in our assets like 401ks, Roth IRAs, real estate, etc., that if we didn't work a single hour, our investments could take care of us financially. That is financial independence because now you don't have to even work. And so financial freedom is where you're not a slave to the lender, as Proverbs 22:7 says. Financial independence is where you don't have to work. Doesn't mean you shouldn't work, but it just means you don't have to work in order to take care of your family.
So how is that different from what most people think of when they hear financial independence?
Well, honestly, this is just my take on it. I don't think most people know what they mean when they say it. It's kind of like when I say, I love ice cream. Do I really love ice cream or do I really like ice cream? I don't. Well, maybe I do, but you know what I mean? Or coffee. We throw out love sometimes, or I love my sports team, or I love this. I love my wife way more than I love my sports teams, but I might say I love the Packers, or I love the Hawkeyes, or I love the whatever, right? But I think the same is true with financial independence and financial freedom is we throw those words around, and I don't think it's necessarily wrong, but I don't think most people have a real working definition. All they're saying out loud is, I'm in a much better place now than I was. Or I'm from the Midwest, and I ask people, where do you want to travel? And they go, anywhere south in the winter,
Anywhere less cold?
right?
Yeah, I think that all people, a lot of times they hear those words and they just know, well, that's what I don't have.
Exactly.
I don't have, for that matter, financial peace is one of those too. Well, I know I don't have that.
Well, honestly, the main reason why I went to this level of defining, it actually came out of editing my book. Because up until the book writing, I didn't have it defined,
Mhm.
but I was talking about financial freedom very loosely or financial independence. And one of the things in my book and Level Up Your Finances that I made very clear from the get-go is there's no investment advice in here. I'm not
Mhm.
against investments. I love investments, but too many people are drowning in debt. And the last thing they want to do is talk about something that they can't even see doing. And so I
Mhm.
wanted a book that said, hey, we're going to focus on the foundation only. And we know this, right? Without a foundation, you can't build anything on it, right? And so to me, when you have no debt but a house, you got a fully funded emergency fund, you now have a foundation. And as I begin to define that, I'm like, oh, so that's why I took the time to do that.
As you were saying that, I was thinking about a friend of mine who I have invited to Financial Peace probably 6 or 7 times over the years. And he wants to go find a way to make $1 million and he won't come to Financial Peace because he's after what we're defining really as that financial independence. He's not really up for the work to get there yet, I don't think. But because we know that you can't really have one without the other. You can't have financial independence truly if you've got a hot mess in your backyard, you know. And but so I get also the other side of things. People are aiming at, well, I want to do all this so I don't have to work anymore. And that I always kind of question, like, okay, well, for one, that sounds kind of boring life for me. But I could see, okay, so I don't have to work for money anymore. I could see the attraction there for sure. But are you willing to look at what's holding you back and not just at this cool, shiny object out in the future too?
Well, Joanne, I don't know about your clients, but I know the first session we really dive into their goals.
Mhm.
And you know what I'm discovering every time the word retirement comes up, at least with my clients, they all say the same thing. I don't want to be on my back porch playing checkers all day, drinking tea and chasing the neighbor's dog. They want to be productive doing something. But what it really boils down to is they want to do something because they want to, not because they have to. That's the big thing. And I'm a huge fan of this nonprofit ministry called Generous Giving. Well, they teach generosity, and I really recommend it. And one of the stories in there, of the testimonies, they talk about you should live a generous life. And life is an acrostic. We should be generous with our labor, generous with our influence, generous with our finances, and generous with our expertise. And so I'll be honest, I was one of those that wanted to retire at 40. I thought that sounded so cool, right? I'm now in my mid 40s and I'm having a lot of fun. I'm like, my retirement gig might be this too, just because it's so much fun getting to help people with money. And so, yes, I think we want to avoid the trap of just have enough money just to sit on our laurels. And I don't know about you, but most people I find, if at retirement they're doing nothing, give it 6 months, they're usually dead.
Mhm.
And I don't mean that flippantly, but it's just, God wants us to be active, look
Right.
different, and it may look similar. Who knows?
No, I just recorded another interview. I don't know if it'll come before or after this one, but we're talking about how there's not really a biblical model for what we see as retirement. The closest we get is somebody like Moses, who kind of has a second career, thinking about retiring to something, not just, I want to be done with this job or the way things go, but no, what do you want to actually be able to do? Which for me, that's where financial independence actually comes in. Financial freedom first, but financial independence, because if that's so that I can go do something that maybe doesn't pay as well, um, or whatever that case may look like, then you're going to something and not just running from punching the clock.
Well, and think about this. Most people are in debt. So the idea of even having enough in investments to cover your monthly and annual expenses doesn't even seem possible. But when you achieve financial freedom, for most households, it's a big deal. Paying off $100,000 in debt, $200,000 in debt, $500,000 in debt. I had one couple come in my office with over $1 million in debt, all student loans. There are two private dentists, out of state, tuition costs. But nonetheless, when you pay off your debt, and you know this and I know that, it took a Herculean effort to get there. But the biggest thing is you accomplished it by God's grace. You got there. So now you've got this belief system said, whoa, we can tackle that didn't even look possible. Now we're going to go, well, if we just did that and God was so good to get us here, now you can start thinking in ways that just seem like a pipe dream. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe I could.
Yeah, there's so much more possibility. And I started to sense that possibility even while I was paying off debt and starting to sense that the plan was working. Yeah.
Yeah, all my clients are the same way on that. The first month of following a budget from this couple that was 6 figures in debt, he already saw a difference. He could
Mhm.
see that light. And that reminds me of a story, even though I thought with a pastor, but it just proves the point. I had a single mom I was working with two kids. She comes to my office and we meet and she says, Justin, I'm going to keep it real simple. I have two goals. One, I want out of debt in 2 years. Two, I want to drop my second job now. Awesome. So we put the numbers in, we do our thing. And I go, well, ma'am, I got good news and I got bad news. Good news is I can get you out of debt in 2 years. She goes, great. What's the bad news? That second job. I've never been a single parent. My wife has. And I can tell you it's hard from what I've observed. And as soon as I said, if you're serious about getting out of debt, you need the second job, tears started going down her eyes. And if you could have saw her in person, this is no judgment on her. She looked fried, just spent. She goes, Justin, I don't have the energy anymore. You don't understand. Da, 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 da. And I go, well, are all the numbers on my spreadsheet true? She goes, yeah. I go, I know why you're tired, because your entire second paycheck that you get from the second job, all of it's going to everything else. You're not seeing traction.
Mm-hmm.
But if those numbers I have on my spreadsheet here are accurate, all your monies from the second job should go squarely to debt. And I saw just a twinge of hope there. And I go, can you commit to at least 90 days of the second job to prove these results are here? And she goes, you know what? I can do it. Here's why she could do it when she was begging me earlier, please, I hope there's another answer. It wasn't this down the road someday. There was a timeline. There was an end. I think of another client once where our very first session, I just said hi. And the husband goes, well, I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm not going to sell the Harley. Wife goes, I'm not cutting up the credit card. I almost fired him on the spot. I'm like, whoa, who are these people? When I showed them what would be possible, what it would look like for them to get out of debt, and they believed, then next nanosecond, the wife goes, well, I guess I'll cut up the credit card. Husband goes, I will sell the Harley. I haven't even got to tell them that they need to do that. And I said, guys, stop for a second. You almost chewed me out after I said hi last session. You won't do this and you won't do that. And freely you'll do it. What changed? And the wife's answer, I'll never forget, Joy. She goes, when there's no hope, you'll never sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
We have hope we can do it. It's worth paying the price to see if we can get there.
That's good. When there's no hope, we won't sacrifice.
Yeah. And it's almost like we were talking about this in our last episode about lies and Satan. Well, think when you're hopeless, sin becomes easy. Why? Why bother? Sin of all types. Because if you're that hopeless, it's like you have hope. It's like maybe it's worth the sacrifice here.
One of my favorite quotes from the Hunger Games, they said that hope is the only thing stronger than fear.
Ooh, I like that.
And so you get somebody coming in and they're afraid of what's all those numbers on the page, what the reality is today. They're afraid of staying there, but they're also afraid of the things that they'll have to do to get there. They're afraid of burning themselves out if they work the extra job to get out of debt. They're afraid of this, so they're afraid of that. If we can allow ourselves to have hope, yes, which sometimes means bringing somebody in to point out the hope to us, right? But if we can allow ourselves to have hope, that can help us drive out the fear.
Absolutely.
So thinking about financial freedom, can you give us a practical example of what that might look like for maybe a pastor with a family?
So again, if we define financial freedom as no debt, but a house, and I know some places, some churches do parsonages, but we're just going to say no debt, and 3 to 6 months of savings, which for most people's $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in that range, maybe a little higher, but that's typical. The average household has about $1,500 to $2,000 a month in debt payments when you add up car payments, student loans, second mortgages, medical bills, 401k loans, back taxes, owing friends and family. You add any of that in there, it's not uncommon to see $1,500 to $2,000 a month. Mm-hmm. So for the people listening to this podcast, let me ask you, if you could free up $10,000 to $20,000 a year in your budget, what would you do? I can tell you I've seen a lot of people do. They increase their generosity. Believe it or not, when we don't have the financial pressures, we're nicer at home. And when we're nicer at home, we're less likely to have marital issues or issues with kids. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean this in anything to be sour, but I've flirted with the idea in my younger years of being a pastor. Can I tell you one of the reasons that kept me away? I didn't want to have pastors' kids because the pastors that I saw and the kid just always seemed like this big fight. And I'm like, now I was wet behind the ears. I didn't realize other things at the time. I was, early 20s, right? But seriously though, when you don't have this big financial burden, that doesn't mean you're going to buy our kids everything and you're going to roll up to your church in a Lexus. And if you do, I'm not mad at that either. But the bottom line is when you don't have any payments,
Mhm.
you will be different at home, which will make you different at church. And you can be a better example through generosity, through whatever. And the better you are in other areas of your life, the less problems arise that you have to fix.
Yeah. Your family will not be at risk to the same degree if your church is having financial trouble too,
Right.
which is a huge thing. I was at a conference last year for church planters, and one of the speakers was talking about, and I don't know any of the percentages, but that a lot of church plants fail because of the pastor's personal finances, because the church isn't at a point to be able to support them yet. And the pastor's personal finances are not in a position to be able to sustain after the fundraising money runs out. And so what would it look like? There's a family I know that had a pretty significant pile of student loan debt. They'd paid off a lot of their earlier debts, but this was just hanging around, and it was about the same size as mine, so it was probably about like a $900 a month student loan payment. And they felt, it's kind of funny. I had a conversation with them, and I wasn't sure, like it wasn't a coaching conversation. It was just, we're just chatting. And I didn't know if they were going to take any action on that, and I didn't hear anything about that for 9 or 10 months. And 9 or 10 months later, they said, well, God kind of told us to get out of debt. And they had made, without telling anybody, they had just made huge, phenomenal progress over that. And, a year later, they were done with it. And they were done with it in time for one of their other income sources to disappear.
Yeah.
And they didn't owe any payments. Just they had the house, but no student loans, no car loan, none of this stuff. And God opened some doors for them that they would not have been able to walk through with the baggage that they would have been carrying, holding on to that.
Well, and several thoughts come to mind, Joy, to be thinking about. One, what pastor doesn't want to celebrate with their congregation when any kind of success they've had in the Lord? Not as a braggadocious statement, but just to go look what God did. It's kind of hard not to say that out loud. Well, guess what happens if you're a pastor or a leader and you share what God did financially, how you got out of debt? Well, if you share that, if just one household from your church gets it,
Yep.
a marriage could be saved.
Yes.
And think how much time is needed to spend on a marriage that's struggling, from counseling, and then we go back and forth. Are we divorcing, not divorcing? What does scripture say? And that's the whole topic of weeds in and of itself. And then let's pretend this household that was married, they were faithful tithers, but now they're getting a divorce, and that couple's getting a divorce. One of the spouses may not be there anymore. Their income's down. And a lot of people, when they hit financial snags, one of the first things to go is their giving.
Mhm.
And so if you as a pastor get it and you share it with your congregation, and one church member is spared, or one church member changes their way they do it to God's ways of how they do it with money, and my guess is it's probably going to be more than one. So this thing scales pretty quickly, both in terms of positive, what comes out of it, or negative. Or, as you said, a lot of church plants fail because of the pastor's financial situation. Well, we plant lots of churches around here. I'm part of the SALT network, where we plant a lot of churches in college communities. And let me tell you, there's a lot of energy being spent in interviewing and training and setting up.
Probably not a lot of big tithers in those college communities.
You can't tie the law off of liver and peaches. You can tie some. And obviously they're going to have some other families that can. But now imagine that church plant where the pastor's already gone. Now we've got to reinvest all this energy in where's this person coming from? And if you take that from another church in your plant, someone, no matter how you chase it, you still got to replace it. But then again, in that church planting scenario, let's say one of the households in the small church plant again gets a divorce, and money is the number one cause of divorce. Access to communication, money is a subset. You can't afford, pardon the pun, to lose many of your donors in that kind of situation.
Right. Well, and a lot of those church plants, that pastor has to back out of it, their personal finances, the church just closes.
Yeah.
And right now there's more churches closing than opening in the US.
I could be wrong on what I'm going to say here, so I have to go back in my notes. Our lead pastor just shared last week, he was listening to a real estate podcast. It wasn't even a Christian podcast, it was a real estate podcast. If I heard him right, he said in the next 10 years, there's going to be 100,000 churches closing up shop. Because what they're talking about from a real estate perspective is how do we turn these buildings into other uses?
Right. Then that's consistent with what I've heard too. And, some of that is we don't have a strong pipeline. We have a lot of people like I've looked at studies kind of across the country, but I know the specific numbers for my area and my organization that 10% of our pastors are under the age of 40. Another 10 to 15 in the 40 to 50 range. We have some amazing veteran ministers who are retiring, who are getting to the point in their health where they're not able to continue, or where they're eventually passing away. And we don't have enough people coming in and staying in is really what it is. And if we could help pastors stay healthy, that's why this podcast exists. That's why we are here. Is how can we help our leaders stay healthy in ministry for them, for their families, for those PKs that are going to grow up, hopefully not hating the church, but also for that single mom that needs to hear about Jesus. She needs you to stay in the game.
Yeah. And that was our lead pastor's big heartbreak. It's like, how many people aren't going to be shepherded that need a shepherd? Right. And obviously we serve the shepherd, but we need that. And you mentioned healthy. All my clients, it's interesting. A lot of my clients, when they get their finances right, they start working on their health. Yeah. They start working in other areas of their life. And so as a pastor or a leader, you get your finances right. And you go, well, hot darn, that worked. Maybe I should work on my health now. Or maybe I should fill in the blank. Or even if something, because pastors burn out a lot, now that you've got the margin financially, maybe you get a small hobby. Now, what's a hobby matter? Because you got to have downtime. You got to be able to go and get rid of all, because there's a lot of stress being a pastor. And if there's not downtime,
you're a better leader.
No, because you can just see so much, the ideas that you can generate, the time that you can allow yourself to just ponder, God, what's next? Spirit, speak to me. What's the next thing, right? But when you're neck deep in debt, you're not worried about the next vision. You're going, how do I eat?
You're in firefighting mode.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what are some common misconceptions pastors have about what it actually takes to gain that financial freedom?
Well, I would say a lot of pastors, if they took the same skill set and went to the marketplace to do something else, they'd make a lot more money, right? And I think some misconception is, well, I don't make enough to actually be able to achieve financial freedom. That's for people who are C-suite executives or business owners and leaders, right? And it's like, no, like, even if you're not making the same wage as you should be as a pastor, everyone has opportunities. So that's one misconception, is I just don't make enough. Either the church needs to step up somehow, or what changes do you need to make to get to be in a better place so you can stay in ministry? That's a big misconception, is that I don't make enough money to be able to do that.
I remember hearing a debt-free scream on the Ramsey show a couple of years ago that was somebody who was making like $30,000 a year, and they paid off significantly more than that in debt. And I remember thinking, nobody else has any excuse. If it's possible, and I think that's something we need to hear. I'll go crawl through the Ramsey show and pull the stories of specifically pastors, because we need to hear stories of somebody that's actually done this, whether they had super low income, whether they went and got another job, but people who have worked through and who've been able to stay in ministry. I think that's important back to hope, right? For me, those stories gave me hope.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then what would be some of the key steps or milestones on the path to financial freedom for our ministry leaders that are listening?
Yeah, and I might just take this opportunity to go through the 5 levels to achieve financial freedom because they work for pastors as anyone else. That first level is awareness, getting crystal clear on what do we make for an income? What do we have for expenses? And we account everything. What do we have in our old investments? What do we get everything organized? Again, and when you have awareness, that leads to clarity. So the first level is awareness. Second level is knowledge. This is where we learn the how to. How do I budget? How do I save? How do I get out of debt? Right. So level 2 is knowledge. Level 3 is commitment. This is where we have to say yes to what we learned back in the knowledge level. And if you make a yes decision, then every paycheck you should be seeing results. And if you see results over time, that leads to the fourth level, which is momentum. Momentum is when you get that traction. You have that feeling of, yes, this is that's the feeling I was searching
It's
for.
working.
And if you do momentum long enough, then you get to that fifth level where you have no debts, but maybe a house payment, an emergency fund, the freedom level. And the graphic in the book is a pyramid, not a pyramid scheme, but there's a pyramid with these levels. And you'll see on the left-hand side is an arrow of hope. And as you go up the levels of the pyramid, as you go up the levels, these 5 levels, hope increases every step of the way.
Yeah. That awareness, I feel like, is so key because we kind of hide from it. For people that have been ever on a weight loss or fitness journey and they're afraid to look at the scale, I was using a program called Noom for a while that has you weigh in every day so that you get rid of that scale anxiety and you start to learn that like this information is not bad or good, it's just information. And that's what I'll tell people when we're sitting down and we're looking it's like, I don't care if your budget, if you tracked all your transactions this month and everything's ugly, it's just information. We're just seeing where we are.
Yeah. And how many times, again, all these lives we listen to, but Joy, how many times have you had a client who just thought game over and we get all the numbers in and they're actually for surplus?
Yep.
It may not be a big one, or if they're in the red, it's not as bad as they thought. Yeah. I mean, the number of clients I'll ask them, what are your ahas and takeaways from today? And I'll hear, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought. But for the ones that's just as bad or worse, every time I hear this, but I have clarity and I now know I need to do something. Yep. I'll never forget years ago, this is a business client, and I said, hey, bring in your profit and loss statements, to which he said, what's a profit and loss? Uh-oh, well, we're at the very beginning, right? And this guy his business was grossing just under $1 million a year. Wow. I did the first 7 months, just a very rough profit and loss. And 5 of those 7 months, he lost at least $10,000 or more. Now, I know guys like big screen TV. So we're in my conference room with a big screen TV, and I have this profit and loss broke out, real big. Guy just sees the numbers. I didn't even say that much. And he just goes, there's going to be some changes made around here. And got out of debt. And how many times, Joy, have you seen it? I know I have. Not always, but simply awareness can be enough kick in the rear to go, ooh, we got to do something about this.
If you've ever tracked your food, a lot of times you change your behavior just by tracking because you become aware of things that you weren't aware of before. And what I've seen, I have a client right now who's a single mom who has really been struggling the last 18 months. It's just been like Hurricane Murphy in her house and struggling to get really enough income. She's rocking the budget and struggling to get enough income to make ends meet. But she has told me over and over, so like sometimes she'll feel like she avoids the budget because there's not enough. But when she actually sits down and does it, she feels like she's in control again.
Absolutely.
And it loses, like, yes, there's still the enemy is still at the gate, right? But it's also very clear what needs to be done to take care of that and to fix that problem. The goal, whatever the number is that she's in the red this month. Okay, that's a clearly defined objective. We know that we need to come up with $400 or whatever it is. And she said multiple times, like, once I sit down and do it, okay, ouch, it sucks, but also we can work through this. And you can't work through it if you don't know what the scary thing is, if you've just buried your head in the sand. The reality is that God gave us our finances to manage. He's made that part of our responsibility. And if we're church leaders, he's made those church finances on some level, depending on your role, part of our responsibility. And we can't manage it if you're just like your business owner that hasn't done a P&L. We can't manage it if we don't know what we're looking at.
Well, and you mentioned food. I'm going to pick on myself here. I bartered services a while back for a personal trainer for some coaching. And, just like we do with our clients, track our expenses, she had me track our food. Now, I sounded like my clients, Joy. Well, I don't overeat that bad. I'm not like them over there until I tracked it.
Mm-hmm.
First day I tracked it, Joy, I had a bad day. I mean, everything went wrong. I went home, not in a good mood. Anyway, to console myself, I do what I always do. I ate food. I had to track it. And I noticed, wow, how much I ate. The next day, I had a great day. New clients getting successes. Work was great. I come home. Everyone at home's feeling good. I'm in a good mood. And you know what I did to celebrate, Joy? I ate more food. So by Thursday, I'm looking at how much I ate. And I'm like, there's a reason the gut's getting bigger. But in my head, before I tracked it, I didn't think I was that bad. Now, yes, was I eating a whole box of Ho-Hos and, drinking 72 Pepsis? No, but I was definitely overeating.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, only fill your plate as far as it will go. Well, I did that. I just made layers of food. So I kept it within the bounds of that. And so, but again, to this day, that 1 week of tracking, I tracked it for a month, but that first week, yes, I don't live with a personal trainer now. I can tell you, if I ever catch myself going off, I no longer believe the lie, well, I wasn't really eating. I now know, no, you've been overeating. The body is showing you this. You know what to do. So that awareness is so key.
Yeah, it's critical. And we hide from it. We're scared to look at it. But even from a faith perspective, I can't fully bring something to God and surrender it to him if I don't know what I'm bringing to him.
Amen.
I don't know what it is, how bad it is. So for the pastor that's listening and they want to start moving towards that financial freedom, what's the very first step that they should take this week?
First step they should take this week, if to do nothing else, begin tracking your expenses. And I'm going to have you go old school. I don't want you pulling up some magic app that puts it in a nice, pretty pie chart and does your bank statement. But even for 14 days, 2 weeks, I have my clients do for 30, manually write it down or type it out. You will be shocked. You'll have some good habits, believe it or not. You're going to go, hey, I'm actually doing pretty good. I have a challenge I put out to some people that, how many subscriptions do you have? And a lot of them were actually below the industry average, which was great. But at the same time, most of the time people start tracking their expenses, especially the number of transactions. You want a shock to the system. You'll be shocked at how many times you swipe your plastic, use cash, automatic withdrawal, this and that. That doesn't make you a bad person, but you're just going to go, 102 transactions in 3 weeks. It just sounds like a lot.
I had somebody who was paying for 3 different Disney Plus subscriptions under 3 different emails. And until they started tracking, they never noticed it.
I had that this last week. Again, I've got an online community that I'm just doing a beta test with right now. I got about 200 folks in there. And what was interesting is that was exactly what someone said. They couldn't believe the number of duplicate and unused subscriptions, which reminds me, I have a client from years ago. This is, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago now. They kind of got lazy, stopped doing a budget. And when they went back on it, found $500 a month in subscriptions.
Wow.
Of which, Joy, get this, half of them they weren't even using.
Mm-hmm.
And can I tell you, he was a pastor? And I'm not saying any judge or shame at all, but he just wasn't paying attention. He wasn't aware.
Well, and there's this thing in some, especially depending on your generation in the ministry community, I saw this with my grandparents were missionaries. There's this like guilt about spending the time or the money on yourself or on your own family sometimes. And oh, we need to go do this or we need to go do that because this is the role. And the reality is that we can't do those other things well if we're not taking care of our own home and health and finances and family, all these
Mm,
things. But it starts, and so it can feel like, okay, I don't have time to go look at that because I have to go do this thing for the church. I have to meet with this person. But the reality is, it doesn't have to take a massive amount of time.
right.
It
And
doesn't.
honestly, it might take a little bit of time at first, but after that first pass of getting everything organized, it infinitely goes a lot less.
You find all the subscriptions, you can cancel them.
Enjoy, I bet you have too. When you get rid of the excess and you prioritize what's important to you, whatever that is, you enjoy it more.
Yes.
I got a client right now they're working with for years. They're now out of debt, emergency fund funded. They're in the process of building close to a dream home on an acreage. Something I've always wanted to do, and they're in the process of doing that. And on there, we had this cop just last night, in fact, what it was. And they talked about how right now the wife is driving a car without air conditioning in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Could she buy a car? Yeah. But instead, she goes, I love horses.
Mm,
To buy, to maintain, and I don't want to go in debt for it. She's only suffering through one summer, not a lifetime. Guess
right.
what she's going to do next year when this house is finally built? Get a different car. Right? She's not going to drive a non-air conditioned car forever. But for her, it was, hey, I don't want to give up horses, and I won't give up horses. But if
Yep.
she tried to buy a car, build a house, have the horses, all the subscriptions, all what
Mhm.
I've discovered is if we try to have everything now, none of us make enough money to have everything now. We do not have that kind of income. Even if you make high income and you're not a pastor listening to this, you still can't get everything you want at the same time when you're in the middle of building financial freedom.
Yeah. I start my clients off with a vision and values exercise. And part of why we do that is because for me and for my clients, totally happy if they decide to choose a path that does not involve making a huge ton of money. If it gives them the freedom for the value to pursue what's valuable to them, what's important to
Right.
them, or on the flip side, if they're doing something that's making great money and they're also spending a lot over here. I don't care what you spend your money on, as long as it's purposeful and intentional and obedient to what God's called you to do. And
Amen.
so starting with that view of getting out of debt does not mean getting rid of the things that I feel like God has said are important to our family. I've talked to people who like hospitality, having people over to the house all the time is really important. Okay, plan for it. Let's do it on purpose.
Right.
And, if that's what's really important, for somebody, it might be being able to have one of the spouses stay home with their kids, and if that's what's important and that means you move slower, that's okay. But being intentional and being purposeful about it through that process. Let's start tracking your transactions. Just get a little self awareness of what's happening. And honestly, sometimes you end up just clearing up the accidental clutter in that process too. I canceled so many subscriptions the first month I tracked. Things that I didn't even know were there. They just sneak up behind you.
Oh, dude.
Yeah. So, okay, let's go to our lightning round. So, I've got three questions, just quick hit answers. So, first one is, what's one money mistake that you see people, goodness, what's one money mistake that you see people make over and over?
I mentioned this before, but not saving for those non-monthly expenses like Christmas, car registrations, car repairs, et cetera. You need to use sinking funds to save for those. And I see that over and over again. And you start to get a little traction, then the car insurance is due. We'll be saving for those every month, not just for their needed to be paid.
Yeah. So, those like annual things or those things that are maybe not a set time of year.
Exactly.
What's the best financial advice you ever received?
Oh my gosh. I've got this like three of them kind of like jockeying for first. Um, the one I'm going to talk about here is I had a friend of mine years ago who I just knew was very generous. And I also knew that he had a lot of money. And I'm like, man, I want to give like you, but I don't make your kind of money. Don't know if I ever will. How can I give like you? And I'll never forget what he said. Justin, if you're not willing to give now, you won't give when you have this later.
Mhm.
And I'll go ahead and throw in a bonus one because from the same guy. We have 5 kids, and 2 are grown and gone. A third is soon to be grown and gone. And we've had a season where nothing but teenagers. And he said that will be your most expensive decade. And even though I kind of knew that, it was never said that way. And so, talk about awareness. I've had the right mindset to go, hey, this next decade, we are just getting through. But what I realized too is he said that with money, but it also meant time. We spent more time with our kids now than ever as they're teenagers.
That's good. And then you're not criticizing yourself for why is my grocery bill so high? You got a house full of teenagers. That's why your grocery bill is so high. So just own it and walk with it,
And I'm
not beating
excited
yourself
because
up about it.
kid 3 is leaving. I'm not excited they're leaving. I'm going to miss them. But it's the first time the grocery budget, actually, we're going to be able to start reducing it because we're on the other side of the curve now.
There you go. And last one, if you could wave a magic wand and fix one thing about how pastors think about money, what would it be?
I think it would be a more drivenness to see their congregation become debt free.
Mm.
Because I don't think there's any pastor out there that doesn't see it as important. I think that'd be a misstep. But I do believe it kind of gets pushed under the rug between, well, we got to do this building campaign, or we've got to do with this. And all that's great. But do you know how many things you can do when your church is debt free, both as a congregation and your church as a whole is debt free? The level of generosity, and I don't mean this to be a brag, but I've seen our church do, especially during the pandemic, because the year prior we paid off the mortgage. None of us knew the pandemic was coming.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, without a mortgage and paying all that interest, the level of generosity, and again, our church is not perfect, but what it could do because it didn't have that debt.
Mhm.
But then also the members within who didn't have debt.
Right.
Because I meet with so many people that are in debt and they want to be more generous and they just don't see how. And so with pastors, if I could wave a magic wand, take more action to what they already know is true.
Well, as we wrap up then, how can listeners connect with you, learn about the book and what you're doing online?
Absolutely. Just go to the website, levelupyourfinances.com. And on there's a link. You can click to buy the book. We have an audio book that I've read, hardcover, paperback, ebook, but also there's free resources and a link to learn more about how coaching can benefit you or any member of your congregation and church.
Wonderful. Well, Justin, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this conversation and hanging out with you. And I look forward to seeing what happens next in your journey.
Joy, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.